22,000 years ago, long before the pyramids rose from Egyptian sands, long before the first cities took shape, something remarkable happened in the frozen wilderness of what we now call North America. A group of early humans stood at the edge of survival, facing a landscape that would kill the unprepared. The Ice Age gripped the continent. Mammoths wandered through valleys of snow. And in this unforgiving world, these ancient people did something that would echo through millennia. They invented transportation. Not the wheel, not the cart, something far more ingenious for their time and place. For decades, archaeologists dismissed the evidence. Too advanced, they said, too sophisticated for Stone Age minds. But the proof was there, buried in frozen earth, waiting. What these early Americans created would change everything we thought we knew about human innovation. The question isn't whether they did it. The question is how we missed it for so long. The discovery came quietly, as most revolutionary findings do. In the 1960s, researchers working in Alaska's interior stumbled upon something unusual: carved bone fragments, strange wear patterns on ancient wood. At first, nobody understood what they were looking at. The pieces didn't fit any known tool category. They sat in storage for years, labeled and forgotten. Then, in the early 2000s, a young archaeologist named Dr. Sarah Chen decided to take another look. She noticed something her predecessors had missed. The wear patterns weren't random. They were systematic, purposeful, designed. When she reconstructed the fragments using computer modeling, the truth emerged like a ghost from the past. These weren't tools for hunting or cutting. They were components of something far more complex, something that moved across snow and ice with remarkable efficiency. The ancient Americans had engineered the world's first vehicle, and they'd done it when Europe was still figuring out stone blades. Imagine the mind that conceived this invention. No books to consult, no predecessors to learn from, just raw human intelligence facing an impossible problem. How do you move heavy loads across deep snow? How do you transport injured tribe members? How do you follow migrating herds without exhausting yourself? The answer lay in understanding physics that wouldn't be formally described for 20,000 years. They observed how certain shapes glided across snow. They noticed how distributed weight prevented sinking. They experimented with curves and angles, with materials and bindings. What they created was elegant in its simplicity. Long wooden runners, carefully shaped and polished, a platform to carry cargo, bone attachments that allowed pulling without breaking, strips of hide that functioned as primitive suspension. It was a sled, yes, but calling it just a sled diminishes the breakthrough. This was humanity's first vehicle, the first time we created something to move us and our world across distance, and it worked beautifully. The evidence kept mounting. Sites across Alaska, northern Canada, and even parts of the northern continental United States revealed similar artifacts. Carbon dating placed them between 22 and 18,000 years ago. The distribution pattern told a story of its own. These weren't isolated experiments. This was widespread technology, shared across hundreds of miles. Tribes were communicating, knowledge was spreading, an innovation network existed in the Ice Age. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. The sleds showed sophistication that evolved over time. Earlier versions were cruder, heavier. Later models demonstrated refinement, curved runners that reduced friction, weight distribution systems that prevented tipping, even primitive brake mechanisms made from bone and sinew. These people weren't just surviving, they were innovating, iterating, improving. They were engineers, and their engineering prowess gave them an advantage that would prove crucial. While other groups struggled and starved, the sled makers thrived. They could follow food sources. They could trade over vast distances. They became the masters of the frozen world. Now, you might wonder why this discovery isn't more famous. Why don't textbooks trumpet this achievement? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about how we view history. For generations, scholars believed complex innovation began in the Middle East. The Fertile Crescent was humanity's classroom, or so the story went. Civilization flowed from there to everywhere else. Native Americans were seen as latecomers, primitive peoples who crossed a land bridge and survived through luck more than skill. This narrative was wrong, painfully, completely wrong. But narratives have momentum. They resist change. When evidence of the ancient sleds first emerged, many academics simply couldn't accept it. Too advanced, they repeated. Must be contaminated samples. Must be more recent than the dating suggests. It took decades of accumulated proof to shift the consensus. Even now, many people have never heard this story. The textbooks are slowly being rewritten. But history, once written, is hard to revise. The ancient sled makers deserve better. They deserve to be recognized as the innovators they were. Consider what this invention made possible. Before the sled, humans were limited by what they could carry on their backs. A deer carcass might feed a family for weeks, but how do you transport 200 pounds of meat through deep snow? You couldn't. You either ate at the kill site or left precious food behind. The sled changed everything. Suddenly, hunters could bring entire animals back to camp. Elderly people who couldn't keep pace with migrations could ride instead of being left behind. Trade goods could move between distant groups. Children and injured people could travel safely. The sled didn't just make life easier, it made survival possible in conditions that would otherwise be lethal. It allowed populations to spread into territories previously unreachable. It enabled the accumulation of goods and resources. In many ways, it laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Communities could grow larger. Specialization could develop. Art and culture could flourish because people had the tools to meet their basic needs more efficiently. One invention rippling forward through time. The genius of the design becomes even clearer when you consider what they didn't have. No metal tools for precision cutting. No domesticated animals to pull their sleds. No established tradition to build upon. They worked with stone, bone, and wood. They pulled the sleds themselves, using straps across their shoulders and chests. Yet somehow, they created vehicles that worked so well that the basic design remained virtually unchanged for thousands of years. When later peoples domesticated dogs, they simply hitched them to these same sleds. When Europeans finally arrived in the Arctic, they found native peoples using sled technology that was fundamentally identical to what had been invented 20 millennia earlier. Why change what works perfectly? Modern engineers have studied these ancient designs with respect and amazement. The runner curve, the weight distribution, the flexibility of the materials, it's all exactly what modern physics would recommend. These ancient designers intuitively understood principles that we now teach in universities. They were problem solvers of the highest order. They were scientists before science had a name. So what does this discovery really mean for us today? It means we need to reconsider everything we think we know about ancient peoples. Intelligence didn't evolve over time. It was always there, sharp and powerful, waiting for challenges to solve. The ancient Americans weren't primitive survivors lucky enough to stumble into a new continent. They were sophisticated engineers who mastered one of Earth's harshest environments through innovation and brilliance. Their invention preceded the wheel by 15,000 years. It preceded agriculture, writing, and cities. It was humanity's first vehicle, born not from necessity alone, but from the extraordinary human capacity to imagine, to experiment, to create. Next time you see a sled, remember where it came from. Remember the minds that conceived it in the frozen darkness of the Ice Age. Remember that 22,000 years ago, in a world we can barely imagine, Americans invented the future. They did it without fanfare, without recognition, without knowing their achievement would echo through millennia. They did it because they were human, and being human means finding a way forward no matter what.